Hello, everyone. Thank you guys for sticking with us all day. So we are your last, but certainly not least presentation before we have a quick talk from Evan about chapters, and then we're going to have our prize giveaway. But today we're going to do Which Country Star Are You? Jazz hands. I guess that's not country. Okay. But let's quickly introduce ourselves, even though you've been talking to us all day. So I'm Kylie Kaiser. I'm a product owner working with CRM at a financial services firm. I'm also a Microsoft Business Applications MVP, and I'm the chapter leader here in Washington, D.C.
And I'm Aiden Cascella. I'm the president of Excellent Solutions and primarily working as a developer and consultant. I am also a Business Applications MVP and a chapter leader in DC as well.
And how many years have you been an MVP now?
4-time MVP.
4 times. Excellent. 2 times.
Pretty sure Prashant has more than me, though, so I didn't want to bring that up.
Yeah, like 15. Cool. So let's see what we're going to do today. So you can kind of see a little video of our app on the side there. But as we kind of said on the break, we submitted this with the goal of speaking in Nashville this year, so that's why our country music theme. But our main goal was just to try and show some cool stuff that you can do in the Power Platform without ever using code. So the goal of the app was to take a picture. We're going to compare that picture with a whole bunch of country music legends and then be able to tell you which one you look the most like. And of course, we want to display all of this in Teams because it's a very professional application. So it just makes sense for it to be in Teams. So Aiden, you want to talk through some of the technologies that we're going to be making use of?
Yeah, absolutely. So we will be using OneDrive to store our image and create URLs for that to interact with them in different ways. Once we have it there, we're going to be using Power Automate to grab the image content and send it up to Microsoft's cognitive services, in this case, the Face API. And we might be doing that with custom connectors, but we're going to do that, parse out the results, return that to our Canvas app to present the results, and then surface all that in Teams.
Perfect. So that's all the slides. So we're going to jump to the demo. I'm going to quickly turn off my camera because my demo is going to need to access it. So let's jump on over to one of these tabs that I'm going to find. Cool. So this is our Teams, a Teams in the web where we've added in our demo app. So you can see here we have our app. We're going to click on the star, and then it's going to look for a camera. So let's actually, Aiden sent the picture that he wants reviewed, right? We're going to put Aiden on the screen. This is how like old ladies share pictures. This is how my knitting group does it. All right. Now we're going to submit that. And so what's happening now is that's what's calling our flow. And it's comparing Aiden's face with all of the country stars, and it tells us who he is and his score. And then we have the chance to start again and do the whole process again. So that's what we're going to live build for you. So I'm going to stop sharing, and Aiden's going to take over with the flow. And then I'll be doing the Power App in a few minutes.
Great. Thank you, Kylie. And are you able to see my screen now?
Yep, looks great.
All right, excellent. So I just want to start by showing the Azure Cognitive Services and some of the features that are available. And this came out 4 or 5 years ago. The one that we'll be using today is Face. We'll be using an API for that, but these are all API enabled. And what it does is it's all fancy AI behind the scenes that Microsoft builds. It's really easy to work with. And you can do some really, really cool things by combining these together. So for instance, the speech, they have speech to text, text to speech, speech translation, and recognition. And you can essentially chain these together. So you're recording speech in one language, translating it, putting it out to text in a different language, or you can even put it to text, translate it to a different language, and then put it back to audio. So you can build a translating device right in your hand. So very, very cool stuff. So there's a wide application for this beyond just the fun face build that we're doing now. So the face cognitive service, there's not a lot to see in Azure. You set it up, and once you do that, it will put you on the quick start guide. And you can get the API keys, and that's how you're going to interact with the API. And it even has this neat feature for the API console, which is, these are your APIs. So this is your specific endpoint and the location, and then also the keys. So this is like your password for interacting with it. But the console is really, really cool. It's a listing, essentially a listing of all the API options that are available to you, the type of operation it is, has details about it. And as you drill into it, so this one, pick a more complicated one. So this is to identify a face. This is one that we'll be using later. You can select the region that you're in. It will think for a second here. And when this loads in a few seconds, what it's going to do is it's going to build out all the parameters that you need to pass in so that you can fill them out right in the website. You can, so all it really needs is a subscription key. I'll put that in. And it tells you what the parameters are that it expects. Lots of details. You actually build it right here. Fill in your details. And this is the actual request it sends. So you can use this as your guide to when you're implementing this other places. You can send it, and then you'll get the response back. And this is an error code, but it's good. We're connecting and all that. So this is nice, and what we're going to be doing is using Flow to interact with this, or sorry, Power Automate to create flows to interact with this. And the way that we're going to build this this model of our singers, I've got a really, really fancy graphic here. We're going to start with a person group. This is the highest level, and this is your bucket of people. And then under that, you have different what they call a person. And then under a person, you can have lots of faces. And the more faces you have, the better. What's interesting is when you send Microsoft, or when you send the Face API an image, it doesn't store that image. It processes it and discards it. It will return details about if they're wearing glasses, the position of different facial features. And then it also encodes some details about who that person is, but it doesn't actually store the image. So we're going to take a look at building this backlog. We're not going to build that now for the sake of time, but I'm going to show you how it works. And this is just part of the initial setup. We have a flow to create the group, another one to add people to the group, and then finally, because it's an AI model, we have to train that person group. And we did this all with Flow, but again, it's just tedious. It takes a while. So starting in OneDrive, we have two folders. One is the analysis, and this is for the images that we are going to be processing from the Canvas app, like that one. And then we have our repository of singers in this case. So I said Microsoft doesn't hold on to any of the images. So if we want to display who you matched against, we have to keep them, keep a history of that. So let's take a look at our flows to do these. They're very straightforward. Creating the group. This is a button where you give it the name and the group ID. So I think for this one, the name is Country Singers and the group ID is underscore or all lowercase country singers. And using the Face API, it just creates that group. and we get it back. Adding people to the group is we set this up so that when you add an image to that OneDrive folder, it does a few things. Should have updated all these before we started, but it waits for a file to be dropped in that repository folder. Once it is, it will create a shareable link for that. So it generates a URL for that image to pass to the Face API. This variable is being used to pull out the name of the person. So if you look, they are all named with the person's name .jpg. So this is how we're able to get the person's name. Finally, not quite finally, but we will create the person in our group. And once that person exists, we can add a face. So it's not going to be very accurate because we only have one face, so not a lot to go off of. But we will do this for our folks. So if you want to do the same thing for actors or rappers or whatever it may be, you would just drop a different set of faces in your repository and then train the model, and now you're good to go with that new data set. And then training the model, let's look at that really quickly, is not available. It's not one of the out-of-the-box flow actions. So I built a custom connector for that, which I will show a little bit later. So we do have a flow now. So that's how we built the backlog of our images. Do we have any questions now? In my preference, feel free to jump in and interrupt if you have any questions. I'm happy to stop and talk about them. But the next step is going to be to build our flow to take the image from our Canvas app, the one that is captured, send it up to the Face API, and get a response back. So let's do that. First thing we're going to do is have our trigger is going to be from Power Apps, and that's because we're going to invoke it when you hit that submit button. So that's our trigger. Next step is going to be we're going to create this, get this image from Power Apps, and we're going to drop it in our OneDrive folder. So that's going to be OneDrive for Business. You can use SharePoint. You can use probably a dozen other things. I like the OneDrive for Business. So we will specify our path where we want that image to go. And this is going to be in our analysis folder. File name. We're going to make that a GUID. We don't really care what the name of the file is, but we will concatenate a GUID with a PNG, which is the type of file that comes out of Power Apps. And then the file content itself is, we want to ask for it in Power Apps. However, we have to do a little bit of conversion first, just because it's a different type of data. So what we need to do is do data URI to binary, and then we're going to pass in the file content that way. So now we are creating that file in our analysis folder. Once we have it, just like our backlog, folks, what we need to do is get a shareable link so that we can pass that along to the Face API. So again, in OneDrive for Business, we're going to create a share link with the file. We're going to get the ID from the step above. The link type will be direct, and the scope will be anonymous. So now we get a URL anybody can use. Next step is Interface API. So what we need to do with this one is we have a picture, and we need to actually ask it to detect faces in that picture. And it can return multiple images or multiple faces. And what it does is you send it somebody's picture, it does all that analysis on it, it'll tell you it, and then it stores it as well. And it'll store it for 24 hours and then delete it. But for temporary analysis, this is what we want to use. And we're going to pass it the URL that we just created for our analysis picture. So we know that in our pictures, we're only going to get one face back. We only care about one face. But you could pass in a group shot and get back a bunch of details about it. So the detect faces, that's going to return a face ID, and that's going to be the ID for that analysis, whatever analysis it did. So we want to grab that and store it in a variable. It just makes it easier because we're going to have to reference it a few times. So we'll call this face ID, nice and easy. That will be a string. And the value for that, I'm going to copy and paste this in because I always mess it up. The expression, it's the first, so from the body of the detect faces step, it's going to be the first result, so the first face it gets, and then we're going to pull the face ID value off of that. So that's going to be behind the scenes, that is a GUID. So we have our ID for this face that the Face API knows about. And the next step will be to find the closest matches for it. So we have our person group that is up here, our country singer group. But unfortunately, we don't have the specific connector that we need. There are some that is kind of right, but not really. They have like an identify one, but they don't really do the job. And we're actually going to use a API which is not exactly how they intended it. So this is going to be identify is the one that we're going to use. And it can take multiple people. It can take a specific group. And it has a couple of parameters for the maximum number of candidates. So for each face it recognize, or for each face ID you give it, how many matches should it get? And then the confidence threshold, which is how confident does it need to be for it to consider a match? And I don't know what that is by default. It pre-fills in our console to 0.5. So it's not like a percentage of how close you are. It's how confident it is that you're the same person. Now, since we're doing a, who are you closest to, we know you're not the same person, but what we want to do is get the best result. So we actually want to set that confidence threshold to 0. And as you make these updates, you can see it builds out the request it's making. And let me see if I have a good face ID for that. This might be beyond the 24-hour limit that we have, but that's okay. Oh, and I misspelled country, so that doesn't help either. Okay, well, it did get a match, and here's the result is for the face I passed in, A89, it thinks this person ID is the best match with this confidence score. So that's how it would work in the API, but we can't do that from Flow, so we need to build a custom connector. And you can do that under data and then custom connectors. Oh, you know what? I'm going to give this a name and save it first before we keep going. This will be live build closest match. Okay. And I'll do this, actually do this on the other screen. So if we go to data and then custom connectors, this is where we see the ones that, any of them that you've already created, and we'll do a new one. And we can create it from blank or import it from a Postman collection, which is usually what I do because it makes things a lot easier, but we're going to go the hard route here and create this from a blank one. This is going to be our live build face extension. And a couple of options. This might seem intimidating, but it's really not that bad, especially after you've done it a few times. Give this a color for the header. The host URL is where it's going to be connecting to in general. So this is our East US region. The authentication type is how is it going to connect to that API service. And for this one, we're going to use an API key. And we can get all this information from here. So it told us the specific key parameter expects. We can see in, sorry for jumping around, we can see in our request, OCP APIM subscription key, and the value for that key is right here, which you can copy out. So let me get back to that. The parameter name is OCP APIM subscription key. I'm going to keep them the same. Labels how it's presented to the user. And we're going to go to the definition now. And this is where you build out those specific actions that you can select when you're building a flow. So the train action, this is one that we built here. If we have time at the end, I'll jump in and take a look at that, but that's a pretty simple one. Instead, we're going to look at putting a wrapper over that identify API call. And we're going to call it find closest match. The operation ID is how this custom connector refers to it internally. So you can see that's filled on the left-hand side. And we want to tell it about the request that we're providing and the response that we're getting back. So for a request, these are all the details that we'll get from here. Try and go side by side. So it is a post to this URL. Sorry, it's not going to be easy to do it without jumping around a lot, so I will spare you that. Header, don't need, but it doesn't hurt. I'm going to put the content type as application JSON, and then the body is the content of that request that we built out from the face ID, number of candidates, confidence, whatever. And so now with that, it knows how to, it knows what to ask you to properly build that request out to the API. And let's get into the body. Confidence threshold. So one thing we will need to do is we can edit this. It's a number between 0 and 1. By default, it knows its number, but it doesn't quite type it correctly. It types it as an integer, so we'll change that to a double. So let's go back, and we'll do the same thing with our response. And the response is how it knows what to tell you. Came back from the API call. And again, we can get that from the console. So we got that. There we go. I always have to check twice because it doesn't look like it did anything. And now we can create our connector. And that was one action. So now if we wanted to do a train, we would do the same thing here, add a new, add details about the request and the response, and that's pretty much it. It'll just be a second item under the same connector. So I'll create a new connection for our demo using our subscription key. And we can see it'll ask us for details. You can fill in some default values here for like content type, but we're not going to do that. I'll refresh my flow. Let's see if that custom connector is in there. So now under custom, we're going to see those different connectors that we built, and we have our actions. So we're going to find the closest match, and it's going to ask us for those fields. A content type, fill in will be JSON. Person group is country singers. And you can do some cool stuff like having it look for all the groups and populating that drop-down list like we did. We'll see in a moment. Face ID, we have that on our variable. Maximum number of candidates returned is 1, and our confidence threshold is 0. Save that again. And so now what we should get is a response back of the IDs of the person I most closely resemble. So that ID doesn't do us a whole lot of good because we have the images by name. So what we have to do now is go back to the Face API and ask it who does that ID belong to. So we will get a person. And this is what I was talking about with the dropdown. Select our group as country singers, and the person ID, it does get us all the options, but we're going to put in a custom value, and it's going to be that. I'm actually going to put an expression in here. This is the first response because it's built for to process multiple images, so it needs or multiple faces. So we want the first face that it analyzed, the first candidate that it matched to, and then the ID for that person. So we're going to say, give me that person belonging to this ID. Now we'll get that back and it'll give us a name. So we have the name. We want to get that image from OneDrive. So back to OneDrive for Business. And here we're going to do get file content by path. So we know the path are all the same for these. It is, I'll copy and paste this expression. And we're going to start out with our repository. We're going to tack on the name of the person and then .jpeg because we formatted all of the files the same way. So we know that's how we get back the person's picture. So we've gotten our image for the best match. We know who it is, and we need to return all those values back to Power Apps. So we'll respond to a Power App or flow. And this might look familiar if you build flows for Dynamics 365, but we're going to give it back 3 things. First, we're going to give it the name of the person. Who did I look like? And that is going to be coming back from when I retrieve the person. I have their name. Secondly, we'll give them the score. And it's a number between 0 and 1 of the confidence. It doesn't look very good, so we'll just multiply that by 100. And we'll do that with an expression. Multiply, again, we're getting the first result, first candidate, this time the confidence, and we're multiplying it by 100. And then finally, we're going to return the actual image that we have in OneDrive. And the expression here, so we do have the file content, but just like we had to do that conversion on the file coming in, we have to do the same type of or opposite conversion going back to the app. So we're going to go base 64 and now put the file content in there. So that's our whole flow. Grab the file, get a URL, analyze it, match it, and return the details to Power Apps. So that is it. We did it using a custom connector. We didn't test anything, and it's all going to work great because Kylie's going to take it from here.
All right, we're going to see how this goes. All right, I'm going to steal the share and share this screen. Let me move your face, and I'm going to stop sharing my face because we're going to see it when we're testing the app. All right, so let's get started building this app and we'll see how it goes. All right, so I'm going to be working in the same solution that Aiden was working in, and that's important because when I start calling the flow from the app, it is going to be looking for that flow in the same situation. So we're going to go to app, Canvas app, and we're going to set it up like a phone because phone apps are cool. And hopefully everything will run smoothly as we're getting on here. As that's loading, one thing I'll mention is we did call out in the slide deck, Phil Topness has a Face Your Fate Power App demo that both of us, I think, watched to glean little pieces of this and get ready. So that's something we definitely recommend that you check out as well. And so when this gets going, the first thing that I'm going to do is drop in a background into our media area. So let's go to media, upload. I'm going to find my background right here. And I can just simply add this to my screen as the background image. So I'll just set that as a background image. And what we're going to do is just copy this screen 3 times because there's going to be 3 screens in here and we want them all to be the same. I'm going to quickly rename them. So this is our welcome screen. Then we're going to have our camera screen and our results screen. Now, before we get too far into this, let's make sure we save this guy too. So the first time we save, we can set the name and color and all that stuff. So this is live build, country stars, or whatever we want to call it. We're going to make it pink. We're going to give it a star, and then we're going to go to save. And as that saves, one thing that I'll mention about the background is that I just did that, you know, in Paint 3D or whatever, something easy to get a background. And how I got the size for that was just by outputting the height and width from Power Apps using the data there. So super easy to work on that. All right, so now we're going to start adding some stuff here. So on our first page, we're just going to have a title and a button for people to click on. So let's also set our theme. The theme of the demo we showed you was this green color. So we're going to make this one pink because I like pink. And then you'll know that this is real, that we're actually doing it, that it's not a trick of the eye, right? So let's add in a label. We're going to say, which country star are you? Let's make this big. And bigger than that. We'll talk to Mark. Everything's bigger in country music and in Texas, right? So let's do that. And we want to put a button to get started, but I don't want it to be an ugly button. I want it to be a star. So we're going to take this guy and drop him in here.
Bigger. Good job.
Bigger. Bigger. Very Texas. There we go. Perfect. And what we're going to have is we're going to have this star navigate to the other place. So we're just going to click navigate. And we're going to choose our camera screen, and then we can choose how we want to transition. We'll do a fade, right? So then we can hold Alt to test. We went to the next page. Excellent. Okay, screen 2. So here what we're going to be doing is adding our camera. We're also going to add an image to show the picture that the camera took. And we're going to add a drop down to select which camera is being used. So that's for on the phone if we want to use the front camera or the back camera. right? And we're also going to add the submit button to actually submit the flow. All right, so let's add our camera first. Click this guy. There's me. We're going to make him nice and big for use on the phone. A few things we're going to need to set on the camera is we're going to set our stream rate to 100 just so it keeps being beautiful and moving like we want it to. Next, let's go ahead and add in our drop down. And we're going to set our items of our drop down to be the available devices. So camera 1 dot available devices. Okay. So then what we're going to make sure we do is on our camera is we want to make sure that it knows to use that. So let's go to the camera property and we're going to set the camera to our drop down. And one thing I have not been doing a good job of is you should be making sure you're renaming these items that we're using. That's really important for screen readers and just also to make sure that you're not going crazy. There we go. So then it will be using the camera of here. So on this device, I only have one camera, but if we had multiple cameras, we could change it there. Cool. So right now we see a camera, but it's not going to do anything. No data is going to be saved anywhere. So what we need to do is we want to add an image, and this image is going to display what's on the camera, and it's also going to be what we use to take the image. So one thing that we can do to help is also set this to the X and Y and height and width to match the camera. This can be helpful so that you, it ends up in the same spot. So set that to where the camera is. Do the same for these other properties. Excellent. Oh, did that behave with me? No? Decided to go somewhere else? Excellent. We'll do our height. And something this is also can be good to use these properties other times if we want to prepare for responsive design and those types of things. We want to make sure we're ready for when that comes. So then this is important. I think some of the demos we worked on, we found that we could still see part of the camera behind the image and things like that, and we don't want that. Oh. Okay, excellent. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take an image. So what we're going to do is on select of this image, because it's on top of the camera, we're going to set the image, and we're going to set that image to be the camera. Something I think is really cool in Power Apps that I think probably drives developers insane is that you can just like make up variables whenever you want, and you don't really have to do anything special. So we're just going to decide that we have a variable now. So we can set our image to our camera.stream, right? So that's what's currently streaming on the camera. So that means if we get out of this, if we press Alt, I click on this, it should be setting our image, but we're not displaying our image yet. So let's make sure we do that. So on our image, we're going to set this to be var image. Cool. So then you can see it set that, but what if I want to change my picture? Because that was really hideously ugly, right? So instead, what we're going to do is on our select, we're going to have the option to get rid of the picture too. So what we're going to say is if var image is blank, so we're going to use is blank. Oops. If our var image is blank, then we're going to set it to this stream, right? And if it's not blank, then we're going to set it to blank. So var image blank. Make sure we get all the right number of parentheses. Okay, so that's going to allow us to do this. And then I can click it again to clear it out, and it goes back to the live camera feed, right? Cool. Last we need to do is add in our submit button. So we're going to drop this button here. We're going to write submit. And then the submit button is going to need to call the flow. So when we call the flow, we are going to need to go to our action, click Power Automate, and then we're going to select our flow right here, which is going to be our live build closest match. And all we need to pass that is our var image, right? Now, one other thing is we want to be able to get data back from this. So we need to put this into a set, and we'll say set our flow response variable to the results of this, right? And then after I submit it, then I'm going to go ahead and navigate to that other page. So we're going to navigate to our results. Can I not even spell results right? This is upsetting. Navigate to that page, and we're going to be good to go. Oh, one other thing before I switch to that page, because this came up in our testing. Right now, I don't have an image set, right? My var image is blank, but I can still click this submit button. So that means it's going to attempt to run the flow, but there's nothing there, and we're going to get an error, right? So what we want to do is disable this button if there's no data in our var image. So we do that using the display mode property. And what we're going to do in here is say if blank, then it's going to be disabled, and otherwise it'll be edit. Right? Cool. So now you see it's not working. Save a picture. Now it is working, and if we click on it, that's going to kick off the flow. Hopefully it's working over on Aiden's side, and then it's going to navigate us to the results screen. And you will see it is thinking here because it's calling that flow to save and waiting for it to finish to save those variables back to that flow response variable that we looked at. Okay, cool. So what we're going to do here is we're going to display the words, and then we're going to display the image. And we could actually choose, in some of the versions of this we did display both images. So the image that we took as well as the image that was returned, right? But let's start with our text. So we're going to insert another label, and we're going to use a concatenate here so that we can show multiple things. So we're saying you are space, and we're going to get something from our flow response variable. We're going to get the name. And then we want to say with a score of, and then we can use that flow response variable dot score. One note is that this score is a numeric value, right? So it's going to get mad at us putting it here in the concatenate. So we have to convert it to text first. And then we can add an exclamation point because we always need more exclamation points in our lives. So apparently I was Crystal Gale and I didn't get a score for some reason, but let's keep going and we'll see what happens. Let's make that bold. All right, now we're going to drop in our picture. So let's add our image. You can make it big. And I'm just going to set this image to be the image from our flow response variable again. There we go. So there's me. Fab. And if I want, we can display our other image next to it if we wanted to do that, but we don't have to. Let's make her a little bit bigger so she fills the screen. Cool. And then I want to add a button so we can start again, so that when we figure out what I did wrong with the score, then we can test it again and it will be fabulous. So we're going to just call this button start again. And then in our on select, we want to do two things. First of all, we want to clear out our var image because we want the camera to be live when we get back to that page, right? So I'm going to say set of our var image to not behaving. There we go. And we're going to set it to blank. And then we're going to navigate again back to our welcome screen, and we can do another fade because that's cool. And then we're done. So let's save this and publish it, and we can add it back to Teams. And then we can test again with the score once I add it to Teams.
That it is returning the score to the Power App.
Oh, did I do it wrong?
29.4.
Did we mess up?
I'm not sure. We can try it again when we'll
try it again.
Yeah. It is coming back from the flow though. So
weird. Okay. So let me show you how you add it in Teams. So it's super easy. You go to Power Apps. It says, here are your Power Apps. And I know we are like right at time. So hopefully this responds quickly. Because it's going to show me my app, and then we can just select it and run it right within Teams. Okay, maybe that's not going to behave. So we'll just play it from here. So you can see our final app. We can start again. We're ready. We can submit it. I see my buttons are a little off kilter, but this is what happens in a live build, right? Again, it's calling our flow. And all of this is already available that you could be running it on your phone if you had that too. And so now I got somebody else. And we'll figure out what's going on with the score. We swear it works. We showed you before. But let's jump back into our PowerPoint. I think all we really have left is if there are any questions. And I think a lot of you already know who we are, but here's our details to connect with us. And you can also see a funny picture of Mike because he sent that as a demo picture for that. So are there any questions?
Just wanted to know what real life scenarios have you been able to use the Azure Cognitive Services for? I mean, I've seen a bunch of stuff where it's been fun, playful stuff like this, but I was just curious about what like real life scenarios you've been able to utilize cognitive services.
Aiden, I'll let you take that one.
all right, thanks. I haven't used them in my work life. I've built some fun things like this, but I have seen some real world solutions built with the cognitive services. The first one that got me really into it was a visually impaired engineer at Microsoft who had a pair of glasses where he could hit a button on the glasses that would integrate with the cognitive services. Glasses would take a picture of the room and describe to him what was in it. I saw another example recently from a developer who had autism, who would do the same sort of thing, but it would help him interpret emotions on people, which is something that he had challenges with. I know you can do lots of things like there are lots of examples that Microsoft has that are more kind of business oriented, text processing, transcribing phone calls, sort of like automation for stuff that used to be really tedious. But you're able to chain these together in really interesting ways to solve different problems.